Okay, so welcome to our Sunday Dharma class. We are thrilled to be working with the Lojong training or the 7 points of mind training. It's a very practical and useful practice. And we begin with opening prayers, then I'll talk a little bit about the slogan for the day, and then we have a little bit of time to contemplate that and discussion. So beginning with the opening prayers, all sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. As earth and the other elements, together with space, eternally provide sustenance in many ways for the countless sentient beings, so may I become sustenance in every way for sentient beings to the limits of space until all have attained nirvana. As the Sugatas of old gave birth to the bodhicitta and progressively established themselves in the training of a bodhisattva, so I too, for the benefit of beings, shall give birth to that bodhicitta and progressively train myself in that discipline. At this moment, my life has become fruitful. I have realized my human life. Today, I am born into the family of the Buddhas. Now I'm a child of the Buddhas. From now on, I will forthrightly perform the actions befitting my family. I will act so as not to degrade the faultlessness and discipline of my family. Just as with a blind man finding a jewel in a heap of dust, thus somehow bodhicitta has been born in me. This is the supreme Amrita which destroys death, the inexhaustible treasure which removes the world's poverty. It is the supreme medicine which cures the world's sickness, the tree which provides rest for beings weary of wandering on the paths of existence. It is the universal bridge on which all travelers may pass over the lower realms, the rising moon of mind which dispels the torment of the kleshas. It is the great sun which puts an end to the obscurity of ignorance, the pure butter which comes of churning the milk of the holy Dharma. For travelers wandering the paths of existence, seeking happiness from objects of enjoyment, it is supreme bliss near at hand, the great feast which satisfies sentient beings. Today, witnessed by all the protectors, I have welcomed the sentient beings and Sugatas, Devas, and Asuras rejoice. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So, good to see everyone. And I'm going to locate us in Lojong. Let me pull up where we are. So we are in point 3, the transformation of bad circumstances into the way of enlightenment. And we are on slogan 15, the 4 practices are the best of methods. So the slogans fit together as a understanding, let's say, of the view. And in the last class, we were looking from the perspective of the absolute. And in this class, we're working with the perspective of the relative. So it's like, are we looking from the view of the earth looking up at the sun, or from the sun looking down at the earth? And we were talking about bad circumstances. When you're encountering a very difficult problem, what do you do? And in essence, it was to see the bigger picture, and see the bigger picture in the sense of remembering and calling to mind that the aspects that we're experiencing from the absolute perspective are illusory. So in today's class, we're going into the relative, so we can be exploring with our mind, even though we may not be experiencing it from the perspective of the absolute. That may be just theoretical to us. What do we do in the relative? And the story that we've been using as a metaphor is Milarepa and the cave. So Milarepa went back to his cave, his only home, his one little room, and it was filled with all of these goblins and monsters. And the first thing he did was he tried to teach them the Dharma, but you could tell he was trying to teach them the Dharma in this version of the story from the perspective of, if I teach the Dharma to the monsters, then they'll behave, they'll leave me alone. Essentially, the situation will be comfortable for me again. So that's applying the Dharma with the sense of wanting something, wanting a result, having an opinion about what's going to happen. And they just laughed at him. So he's had to understand that he knew the Dharma theoretically, but he wasn't embodying the Dharma yet, let's say. So you might experience that with, you're having an argument with someone, and then you decide, well, if you teach them the Dharma, then they'll agree with you, they'll see that you're right, and they just laugh at you. So then he studies more, he reflects, he goes back, and he just extends loving kindness to the goblins and says, share my home. Essentially, he offers the home, and not even half, all but one, let's say, disappear. So then there's the major monster. We can think of it as our big wound. And he has to get to the point where he puts his head into the mouth of the monster. And when he's able to do that, not only does the monster evaporate, but it turns into his greatest protector for the rest of his teaching years, the goddess Saringma. So on the one hand, it functions as a koan for us. What does it mean to put our head into the mouth of the monster? And from another perspective, it's saying there is a way to befriend this situation. There is a way to be fearless in this situation. There's a way to apply the Dharma. And when we're at the point of being thoroughly ready to apply the Dharma to the level of our skills, to the level of our understanding, which would be our skills, then we can face what's arising and understand the illusory quality of it, or that there never was an enemy, essentially, is what this is teaching us. And so this slogan talks about how do we do that, and the 4 practices are the best of methods, and the 4 practices are making offerings or accumulating merit, laying down evil deeds, offerings to the duns, and offerings to the Dharmapalas. So this is a uniquely Vajrayana view, and the Vajrayana understanding is this fluid relationship with unseen forces, both beneficial and non-beneficial. So the dons would be a non-beneficial invisible force, and the Dharmapalas would be like Sringma, the Dharma protector. And what we know and understand about this in terms of bringing our cultural view to this is the larger understanding is the only evil force or difficult force, hidden harmful source, is our own distraction, our own confusion that arises as some sort of difficulty. And similarly, being able to see each and every being and as a potential Buddha or their Buddha nature, then enemies dissolve into friends. So it always comes back to how we're holding our own mind. But it also has to do with our attitude towards what's arising, what we're seeing in the situation right in front of us. So if you're around Tibetans, for instance, they might say, oh, I see this person on the path and I see them starting to trip, and I see that it's some sort of invisible force that's pulling them off the path. That is the relationship that they have with reality. Or in our tradition, one of the biggest Dharma protectors in our situation is Achi, who was the great-great-grandmother of Lord Jigten Sumgun, who founded the lineage. And she was an enlightened being, an aspect of Tara, who made a commitment to always be with our lineage in particular, as well as all sentient beings. So, for instance, when His Holiness was escaping from Tibet, he had to walk out on his own, and because he was a high Rinpoche, he felt if he asked anybody for help, it could endanger them. So here he is, a young man, only 26 or so, and I mean, imagine walking from where we are to California with no map, having to cross ranges of mountains, going in snow in the high ranges, having that courage. And so at one point, he got to this gorge that was impassable. And he said, he was there in the gorge, and then behind him, there was a group of folks. They came, they put a log across the gorge. Everybody walked across, he walked across, and then they disappeared. So all of the Drikung say, oh, that was Achi protecting him, and, the karmic circumstances were momentarily an obstacle. He met those karmic circumstances not with resistance, not with a mind that's going, why are you doing this to me, life? Not with a sense of, oh, I'm going to die, I'm high in the mountains, I'm going to freeze to death. It was with this open-heartedness. Sometimes in these situations, people find a way to use their last bit of sampa and make a little torma or make an offering. And when we hold our mind in that way, we're not creating additional heavy karma, and we are creating virtuous karma, which has the capacity to change friends into enemies, which has the capacity to actually change the circumstances that are in front of us. So this would be the perspective that there's this fluidity, both in terms of the circumstances that we're facing and how we're meeting the circumstances, and how we're engaging actually changes what we're experiencing. And so we probably have encountered this in our lives in surprising ways. So we may, I can tell you a story from my life. I was living in a situation where there are 5 guys named David in the neighborhood. And 4 of them were always nice to me. They were just so lovely. You know, David, the heater broke. Oh, I'll be over in 5 minutes, Khenmo. Or, oh, a tree has come down. Another David, oh, I'll come over and take care of that. Don't worry. But there was one David that was a little bit challenging. And one day I was really busy. I answered the phone and he said, oh, it's David. And I thought it was one of the other 4. And so I was so warm on the phone that the challenging David was really warm right back. So there was a sense of in the moment, because my mind was open and I could meet the situation with more warmth, the circumstances changed. So essentially, this is what this slogan is teaching. Here we have difficult or challenging circumstances arising in our life. What do? The first thing we do is not create any more heaviness. We let go of our resistance, and we're really careful to say to ourselves, in this moment, I could go off one way and strengthen my habitual addiction. I could strengthen my habit of anger. I could strengthen my habit of jealousy, or pick your favorite difficulty. I could strengthen my habit of fear. Or in this moment, I could soften, relax, and be open-minded about the situation. And I could choose my thoughts leading to my speech, leading to my actions in a way that pays attention to only creating virtue in this moment. The difficult situation is arising because of my past actions. So if I really know and understand it, that the seeds of whatever is arising were laid in current life or past lives, then how I respond to it is laying down seeds for future suffering or future benefit. So it's really taking a big picture look at how we respond to difficulty. And then it's going further. So that would be the part of laying aside evil deeds. So if someone screams at you, you have the choice to scream right back at them. You have the choice to walk away. You have the choice to say, oh, honey, I see you're having a really difficult day. What can I do for you? Depending on your skill level and depending on the situation. And that leads, even if we look at it from our Western science, to strengthening a neural pattern of a response. Every time somebody yells at me, I yell right back, or creating a new response. I'm going to appreciate the skill level I have and remove myself from this situation, or I can see this person is in pain. Like if you have you all know I have a newborn in my family, so the baby's crying and screaming, and so you go, oh honey, what can I do for you? Can I check your diaper? I see you're suffering. seeing that quality in the person that you're engaging with. And one of the lovely things we learn in the Vajrayana in the Tibetan situation is one way to change the dynamics is to make gifts. So in every ritual, in all the ceremonies that we do, the Vajrayana ceremonies, which are, very stylized, we begin by making offerings to all the beings on the land. So, you guardians of the land, I want you to be happy, so I'm going to make these offerings to you before we start the ceremony. And please don't in any way distract from the ceremony. So it would be like moving into a neighborhood and baking a cake and taking it to all your neighbors. Then all your neighbors are happy that you're there. And then we make offerings to the Dharma protectors with the understanding that we're essentially making offerings to aspects of our mind. Please help me maintain concentration. Please help me from becoming distracted, particularly so distracted that I don't understand this ceremony or can't keep my concentration during the ceremony. In essence, by using the relative, connecting it to our minds and to the absolute, that there is no actual enemy other than our own distraction. So these are the 4 practices. Finding a way to use the situation we're in if there's a challenge to accumulate merit. Changing the fluid dynamics of relative and absolute. Not reifying habits that are negative, and creating positive habits as we accumulate merit, and making offerings. Opening in some way to the situation. In the same way, we could say when Milarepa offered the cave to all of the goblins or monsters, he was seeing their Buddha nature, not separating enemy from friend, and beginning a practice of generosity with those beings. And then that obstacle was completely gone, and then he started approaching the more difficult obstacle. So I'm going to give us some time to contemplate how we might realign ourselves with difficult situations. We're meeting the difficulties of illness. How might we work with that? What is the way of practicing the 4 methods: meeting illness, meeting challenging people, preparing ourselves for increasing difficulties with climate change. We see His Holiness making climate change one of the largest areas of his activity in this period of his life. And encountering that difficulty, and what is the first expression? It's a joy and appreciation of the planet that we have, and then not raging, not becoming hopeless, not losing his sense of courage, but engaging larger and larger circles of people to be planting trees and solving problems in their bioregions. So again, how can we work with transforming bad circumstances into the way of enlightenment, how might you use the 4 methods? And let's contemplate that. Let's give ourselves about 8 minutes to just contemplate individually, and then we'll have a discussion. And I'm just going to dedicate and close the live Facebook, which we do so that our discussions are private. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So the philosophical perspective in Buddhism is that all things are interdependent and things arise due to causes and conditions. So essentially, if you plant a seed and the seed goes into good soil and you nourish that soil, then a plant will arise. And the circumstances that we're experiencing in our lives in a very complex way, with lifetimes and lifetimes of causes and conditions, result in what we're experiencing now. And how we are responding to them then sets in motion our next moment and the rest of our life and future lives. So this is why this particular slogan is so interesting, because it's saying difficulties arise, choose your future carefully. So what was your sense of things as you were reflecting? I'm going to change it into a group view. I know karma is a very complex subject that we haven't gone into very deeply in these teachings. Nancy?
Thank you, Khenmo. Thank you, Sangha. It's like a big inner secret, I think, if you can picture all the choices in your life, and that's just this life. And if you think you might have been here before, all those and those, down to being amoebas and whatever choices we made as amoebas. And it's the secret ingredient is generosity. And with that, it's like magic. There's no predestination. You can let go of your agenda and experience generosity and express generosity, and it puts that in motion. There are infinite possibilities, but with generosity, it's the special sauce of the universe, kind of, it's that thing that assuages all pain.
It's very important, because if you think about what generosity is, it's also the first step in the six perfections, or the teaching of how we let go of our protective bubble that keeps us so focused just on ourselves. It's, can I offer something? Even if it's a tiny thing, it's a way of letting go of me and mine and opening the door just a little bit to the needs and responses of other people. And so it's the secret sauce, and it's the first step. And if you can think of, I love this story about Milarepa putting his head into the monster's mouth. That is offering his whole self, understanding finally that there is no self and other. There never was anything to be afraid of. That's a very distant, it may seem distant from ourselves now, but we can think of it as something to mull over from time to time. But in terms of our experience now, how have you reflected on this, facing difficulties in a different way, or really seeing in the moment that you have choices?
Hi,
Yeah.
Khenmo. I have a question, actually. I get very hung up on this idea of accumulating merit, and how that ties in with making offerings. I mean, to me, I guess it reminds me of Catholicism in many ways. And when you talk sometimes about, oh, if you go on this feast day and do this, it's a 10,000 more, whatever. Adds to it. And it kind of, I feel a resistance coming up when I hear these things, because it does feel like grasping to me. It's like you described Milarepa in the cave. Oh, if I do this and I read the Dharma to these monsters, I'll get something out of it. And so I guess this idea of making offerings and accumulating merit feels that way to me a little bit. So I clearly am not understanding it well. So if you could expound a little bit on it.
Yes, it's absolutely true. This is difficult for many Westerners. Um, and it's sort of a fun in the Tibetan culture. They so enjoy it that it's more joyous. So you're absolutely right. If we are doing anything with the sense of I want to benefit from this, and if I do it with the attitude that I'm going to go to heaven instead of hell, or I'm going to get something that I want, we're not actually accumulating merit. If we're making offerings with a sincere wish to benefit others, then our mind is changing and our attitude towards our life and towards how we're perceiving our whole experience, we might say how we're perceiving reality, shifts and changes. And with the interdependent conditions, it's not a sense of like miraculous the way a Catholic might think of miraculous. So I grew up with a Catholic background. It's more there's the interdependence of ourselves, our mind, and all of reality. So there can be shifts and changes.
I understand that idea, but when you say, for example, oh, if you attend this feast day and make an offering, it's multiplied 30,000 times. I don't quite get that. I mean, how does that fit in with your mind being open?
Um, this is the part I think about Tibetans loving it.
Okay.
So on the one hand, there's a very sophisticated science that if I knew more about it, and I don't, there's a sense of, gravitational fields and energetic fields shifting with
Oh,
time. And so, someone who was astute in that science would say that these special days have a cosmic kind of shift, but also um, there has something to do with, um, you could say, group mind or group prayer. So on this day, if everybody is making offerings and everybody is cultivating an open mind, together it's building something so much greater than just the individual, and we're participating with that building. And then even if you say, oh, it's all too much, it's a little too, uh, I'm just going to say too Catholic because Catholics have lots of miracles. It's a way of understanding, okay, if everything I do on this day is multiplied 100 million times, positive and negative, what do I do with mindfulness on that day? And so we have a day of particular attention to mindfulness, which again affects neural patterns that we are creating in terms of habits. So it's beneficial from that perspective.
and the accumulation of merit, this is supposed to be a development of the opening of our minds. Is that correct?
It's
I mean, just the idea of accumulating, it just feels weird to me, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Let's talk about it really simply then.
Okay.
So one of I think it could have been Geshe Ben, but one of the teaching stories about some of these humble monks who were great masters. Every day he would put white pebbles for all of the things he did that were beneficial, and black pebbles for all of the days he did things that were um, uh, harsh or whatever. And he just kept trying to see, could he have a bigger pile of white stones and let's say a smaller pile of gray stones over from day to day. And so you could say, okay, that's accumulating karmic seeds, and I can see it right in front of me in terms of the pile of stones. So it's talking about our mind, and we can think of it in terms of neural pathways, in the sense that every time we're opening our mind, we're establishing mental patterns and habits that are beneficial towards us or not beneficial in terms of our gaining wisdom. And over time, we're accumulating either greatly beneficial habits or strengthening addiction. So we can think of it very simply like that.
I see. Okay. Thanks.
It also is something we can be open-minded towards. And it's interesting to work with a very different culture that has a whole different perspective on how life and reality works. And I'm just thinking about the times I've gone on pilgrimage, and you can hear that pilgrimage is very beneficial, accumulates merit. But if you look at your history, or like as an American person, to me, it's a trip. It's a trip sightseeing, and it's sightseeing spiritual places. So I might start with that attitude, but visiting those places, doing prayers in those places, all the people that I met along the way, feeling the dynamic field of those places. If you go to Bodh Gaya, it is an extraordinary place. It's in the one of the most difficult areas of India. There are robbers there. It is so scary that you're not allowed to go into the train station by yourself. You have to have practically an armed escort to get to Bodh Gaya. But then you go into the through the walls to where the stupa is, and it's like the whole energy shifts, and it's as tender as a flower petal. The air is soft. Everyone in that area is doing prayers from so many different perspectives of Buddhism. But it's a field of prayer. You see all the different kinds of Buddhists praying. And you go back to your home after the pilgrimage, and it's like such a subtle shift in who you are that you don't notice it. And then, because it's a subtle shift, doors in your life open, and it may be that before the pilgrimage, you wouldn't have noticed that door. You may trust life in a different way, or trust an invitation in a different way, because you've subtly changed. And so I have a great deal of respect for this different understanding of the world, and I can't quite describe in a concrete way, but I can tell you from life experience, I watch people behaving and watch myself behaving in this culture, and notice that it's easier and easier to open to things that I might not have beforehand. So, for instance, when I was becoming a nun, I had just finished cancer, and we had invited this wonderful artist to come and do a mandala at the art school. And he said, "Oh, why don't you come to India with me next year?" So I went on a pilgrimage to India, and my whole life shifted after that. And I don't know that I would have had the courage to leave, a tenured job and a regular income, and just jump into a different life that had no security whatsoever. I didn't have the mindset that could open that door, and then I did. So, other thoughts or reflections? Ginny, are you trying to say something? You're muted again, Ginny.
Okay. Just because you mentioned Bodh Gaya, I just really am smiling. I want to tell you, I went to Bodh Gaya back in the early 80s, and it wasn't like you described it, was really pretty safe. And I was sitting there under a tree in Bodh Gaya, and I felt like I was in this very holy place. And all of a sudden, the pigeons came, and I got covered with bird shit while I was sitting there. And I have always wondered what that message was for me. And so I'm thinking of that, and I'm thinking of your experience was probably not all that, probably just a few years after that. So I thank you for sharing your Bodh Gaya story, because it's made me smile. It's made me think and remember and wonder.
You know, it's so funny. That is a great story, Ginny. And I invite you to keep contemplating, like a shock. A shock opens our mind.
Mm.
But that's very funny. Other thoughts or reflections? Yep, John.
Sort of related, kind of. I've been thinking, I tend to lean very, very strongly non-dualist, and I realize I hide in non-dualism if I'm not careful. How can I say it? Like I love Ginny's story, I could imagine myself just blissed out, barely in my body, in meditation, with this cosmic reminder that that in this ultimate reality, there are still experiences. Samsara and nirvana are the same. That's one of the things I was thinking about, and specifically, my reflection this morning was about offerings. Because I tend to lean so strongly non-dualistic, making offerings, I almost shut down the concept of making offerings. There's no one to make an offering. There's no one to make an offering to. Now that sounds beautifully mystical and everything. It occurs to me though that, as an example, Tara is no more real or less real than I am. No more real or less real than you are, Khenmo, or anybody else in the Sangha. And it could serve me to be a little more Catholic, actually, not to defend Catholicism at all, but to allow myself to play. As one of our first teachers, Nancy's and my first teachers, used to talk about her invisibles, and to her they were very real. They were beings without bodies, and for her there was a room in her house where you couldn't sit because they were meant for the invisibles. And I always thought, oh, isn't that charming? But it's not for me. And yet it occurs to me, it would be good for me to develop a relationship on the relative, not just the ultimate. That's the funny thing about Buddhism, especially how the interpenetration of relative and ultimate gets kind of mysterious. But as long as I'm at least as long as I am embodied, either in a physical body or an etheric body later on, there's some interaction. There is sort of there are spirits and beings, good and not so good, to make offerings to. That's my way of trying to work through the notion of offerings. I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
You know, it's play is a good way to start with it, and and I know you've started Nundro, and so when you get to the mandalas section of Nundro, it is this incredible practice of making offerings all day, every day for ages, you know, until you've made hundreds and hundreds of thousands of mandala offerings. And I'm looking over at my altar how much I enjoy making the water bowl offering every morning. There's a sense of enacting that generosity of mind through pouring water. Yeah, I think it's a great idea to engage with that. You want to have the mind with the sense of no self, no other, but you want to have your engagement with reality, the definite action of making offerings, because they're a continuous teaching of, like when I'm making offering bowls in the morning, if I'm not paying attention, I'm forever spilling the water on the altar or spilling the water on the floor. And I notice, you know, with the offering, you can build a visualization and do prayers at the same time. So you see levels of attention that you're bringing to the offering. And I often remember this very elderly nun that I met, who by the time I met her, she was blind. So she had the prayers that she had memorized, but she couldn't, you know, study, let's say, or read or anything. And she spent most of the day offering water. She became really famous in Dharamsala for doing water offerings with such attention and such engagement that people would every day come with bags of flour to her door, because at the end of the day, she took the water and made blessing pills with the sampa they gave her, and then they would collect these blessing pills. So there was an understanding of this incredible cycle of generosity, you know, bringing her the flour, feeding her. She would pray all day with her spiritual maturity, which then her prayers imbued the water, and people found them to be, you know, you can think of a blessing or medicinal. It was so beneficial, and that there was a cycle of community that was so loving and supportive of each other and appreciating of each other, that had to do both with how people were holding their minds, but also how they were behaving towards each other. And it's really marvelous to think about. So, like, for instance, the last Million Merit Day, which I start to have fun with, you know, I'm thinking, oh, okay, they're building a temple in Washington State, Venerable Tipton Children's Temple. How fabulous. I'm going to give a small amount of money, you know, what I can give today with open-hearted generosity. And, you know, it's the same way I think of when donations come here. If you're creating the circumstance for a temple, then all the future events you're supporting, and you can rejoice in that. Oh, isn't that fabulous? Then as long as they have teachings, you know, it may have funded just one set of nails, one box of nails into the whole building plan, but still I can have this spirit of rejoicing that all of these people are going to be benefit for all of this time. So it's really a, such a rejoicing, tender way to think about how we're engaging with the world and engaging with everything that's going to be beneficial for all the different kinds of people in the future. There's that one of the other wonderful stories is the Buddha was going to a big feast, and like the governor or the mayor was sponsoring it, and he had the best dishes, the best food, and everybody's happy after the meal, and the mayor says, well, I'm so happy I was able to do this, and who gets the most benefit from this? And the Buddha said, well, it's the beggar outside the door, because the beggar outside the door was just rejoicing that this could happen. And the sincerity of that rejoicing was creating such a beneficial state of mind that in every way, in future lifetimes, and what that person would accomplish in future lifetimes, but the sincere opening of heart mind was the greatest in that person. So it's have fun thinking about it. We'll get to the next point goes into the very, very practical ways that everyone can easily relate to, but every once in a while we get a slogan that may be a little more culturally relevant to the Tibetan system and understanding. Other thoughts? Oh, it's 11 o'clock already. Okay, so time to dedicate the merit. So enjoy opening your mind and test it for yourself. What is it like? I'm in a difficult situation. What if I pay attention, don't increase any negative action, and if there's an opening, create a new set of responses to this situation? Okay, oh, wrong one. By this virtue may I achieve omniscience, and may all who travel on the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. For this realm encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of every benefit and bliss without exception. Tenzin Gyatso, you who are one with Avalokiteshvara, may you remain steadfast until samsara's end. Embodiment of the three precious jewels, Padmapani, who holds the teachings of the victorious one, seeing the all-goodness meaning with the wisdom eye, may you who are spontaneously established activities live long for hundreds of kalpas. Noble Manjushri, the Lord of Speech, who manifests to hold the teachings of the Triple Gem, who raises the lamp of the sage's teachings, may you who are the light of the Dharma live long for hundreds of kalpas. The one known in the Holy Land as Aryadeva, emanated into the Gar clan of eastern Tibet as Chodingpa, the heart son of Jigten Sungun. May the life of glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. So wonderful to continue in this fabulous text with all of its slogans to help us call to mind, especially when things are unexpected, what we really want, which is to move closer to our Buddha wisdom, as opposed to increasing our own confusion by repeating the same habits over and over again that have never benefited us. All right, see you in the next class.
Thank you, Khenmo. Thank you, Sangha.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you very
Khenmo.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Khenmo.
Bye for now.